Welcome to
Hello,
Philip
Philip K.
K. Dick
Dix.
Talks. Hello, I have a very special guest today, John Allen Simon, who is a director, writer, and producer of the feature Radio Free Albemuth. For those who don't know, John is his directorial film debut, Radio Free Albemuth, which he adopted from the novel by the science fiction writer Philip K. Dick, Blade Runner, Minority Report, and Scanner Darkly, was distributed in a limited theatrical major 15-city U.S. release and selected to screen at the prestigious Indie Night series at Lincoln Center Film Society in New York City. Radio Free Albemuth recently concluded its exclusive SVOD run on Netflix. And for instances from Variety, we have some reviews such as engrossing adaptation, well performed, consistently absorbing, operates successfully as a study of enlightenment and a straight ahead conspiracy thriller. John has also developed and produced the Roger Donaldson directed version of The Getaway, starring Alec Baldwin, Kim Basinger, and Philip Simon Hoffman for Largo Entertainment. He is the chairman of director of Discovery Productions, which is actively developing film rights to other novels by the science fiction writer Philip K. Dick in partnership with Rosenblum Entertainment, and also works by award-winning science fiction writer Lucius Shepard Ian Watson. Also on Discovery's schedule is the English language film version of Jim Thompson's POP, Population 1280, from which Bertrand Tavernier's Academy Award-winning nominated film Coup de Trujon was adapted with Yorgos Lanthimos. Simon's next film as a director will be the noir thriller Nothing More Than Murder, which he adapted from the novel by Jim Thompson, who's well known by from The Grifters, The Getaway, and The Killer Inside Me. John, in addition, also recently completed his 4K restoration of Dennis Hopper's Out of the Blue. So welcome, John. Thank you for having us.
Hey, Dan. Good to see you. Long time since the Philip K. Dick.
It's been a while. That's right. John won the Best Feature award at the Philip K. Dick Festival, Radio Free Albemuth. Long time.
Right. It was a great event, great screening, and we're very pleased to take part. My producing partner and wife, Elizabeth Carr, was there with me too, and we had a great time. There's such a great community of Philip K. Dick fans. We were also at the Philip K. Dick Festival in Fort Morgan, where we screened the movie, and we were at the Hugo Awards, where we screened the movie, the Worldcon, and at the Science Fiction Hall of Fame ceremonies in Seattle. And I would have to say, of all the screenings, the ones I've really probably enjoyed most have been the ones with Philip K. Dick fans, because it's Philip K. Dick, the writer, is not for everyone, even though maybe they try to make many of the movies for everyone. And we tried to make a movie in Radio Free Albemuth that would be kind of for the people who like the book. It was a modestly budgeted movie, and for book lovers, really. Movie for book lovers. Isn't that interesting? So most of what we do is adaptations from novels that I pick because I love them, and we've been fortunate to get some of them made, and we're trying to get others made.
Well, I understand. I think from the last conversation we had, you actually have a few other Philip K. Dick projects in the works.
We do, and one thing I should correct is that Yorgos Lanthimos, lovely guy, lovely director, is no longer involved with Pop 1280. These are the mysterious things that happen in Hollywood, but we're in active talks with another director to do it, and hopefully that's going to work out. It's a very it's very challenging to get movies made. You're dealing with a lot of a lot of things, a lot of people, a lot of egos, a lot of lawyers, a lot of agents, a lot of managers, and all of them have to justify what they do by finding problems and solving them, and they're very good at it.
Well, I really do commend you for with Radio Free Albemuth for really truly having a very faithful adaptation of the book, because there are a lot of films in Hollywood that, as you have mentioned, are loosely based Philip K. Dick, such, you know, but they're not true to the word and to the spirit of Philip K. Dick. And in which case, but in the case of Radio Free Albemuth, I really found is a feature that truly reflects the themes and that run through Philip K. Dick's work.
Now, I should mention, you asked me a question and I kind of didn't quite answer it. The other two projects we're developing of Philip K. Dick material is Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, and Valis.
Okay.
And
I'm really looking forward to Valis. It's one of my favorite novels. Yes.
And of course, it has an interesting connection in history to Radio Free Albemuth. Radio Free Albemuth was published after Philip K. Dick's death, and it was his first attempt to deal with the experiences he had had in real life with what he called vast active living intelligent system or intelligence system. In one novel, Radio Free Albemuth, he called it intelligent, I believe, and in Valis he called it intelligence. But the novel was originally called Valis System A, and his editor and publisher declined to publish it. So after he died, his friend Tim Powers, he had gotten the manuscript from Philip K. Dick. He had given it to him as a present, and Philip K. Dick had said, hold on to this, it's going to be important. And he just thought it was an earlier draft of Valis, but he noticed that Phil, as we like to call him, had crossed out Valis System A and written in Radio Free Albemuth. And when Tim Powers read it, he realized it really was a wholly separate novel. So it was published that way. What had happened was, as best we can reconstruct it, is that Philip K. Dick's publishing company thought it was too weird, too religious. And so Philip K. Dick kind of went back to the drawing board, and took a few years before he merged with Valis, which was much more experimental, much less a traditional science fiction novel than Valis System A. And in fact, kind of a variation on the story of Valis System A is a movie within Valis. So my theory has always been that Valis System A, Radio Free Albemuth, more than a discarded draft, which some people consider it, was really, he would have called that, he'd have been perfectly happy, his publisher and best friends and people think. And he probably would have called Valis, I like to speculate, Valis System B, if it had gotten published too. I don't think he would have stopped speculating about this mystical experience that he had that really informed the whole rest of his life, the last 10 years of his life. But Radio Free Albemuth was not published till, I believe it was 1985, about 10 years after his death.
And for those who are not familiar with the mystical experience of Philip K. Dick, can you please share with the audience what basically he recounts having?
Well, if you want to see a kind of amusing version of it, the great hippie artist R. Crumb did a whole comic book called The Religious Experiences of Philip K. Dick, which is really fun to read and kind of summarizes it. But what basically happened was that for a 2 or 3 month period in 1974, he called it 2374, meaning February, March 1974. He saw images and heard voices and was exposed to kind of an experience that he had no explanation for it. And he wrote a private journal of over 2 million words kind of speculating on whether it was God or aliens or whether he was going insane. And he recovered from the experience in the sense that he didn't continue to hear voices and see images. At one point, he thought it was the Soviet Union with a mind control experiment beaming out to him. And you might think he was crazy, but at one point, a pink beam hit him in front of other people, and he suddenly had the intuitive flash that his son needed to go to the emergency room, his infant son. And when he went, the doctor said, "What's going on?" I just examined him. And Philip K. Dick said he has an inguinal strangulated hernia. The doctor said, "That's really unlikely." And then the doctor examined him, and he did. And his wife at the time, Tessa Dick, more or less confirms this experience involving their newborn son, Christopher. So it's one of those things that I think of it a little differently than most people. I think of it more as an inspiration for his art than care about whether or not it really happened. The great Irish poet William Butler Yeats had a similar experience. His wife would go into a trance and speak to him and give him this whole system of imagery around which his most famous poem, The Second Coming, among many other poems, is built. And when he asked his wife, when she was in the spirit state, channeling the spirit, "Why have you come?" the spirit said, "To give you images for your poems." So I kind of think of Philip K. Dick's 2374 experience that way. When I was at Harvard, I wrote my thesis on William Butler Yeats and his mystical experiences. So when I first read Valis, which was published, I guess, around 1975 or 1976, I don't focus on all the facts. Someone will correct us, I'm sure. I just thought it was, science fiction. I didn't really realize it was based autobiographical, even though he made himself a character in it. I kind of, in many ways, prefer Radio Free Albemuth as sort of his last real science fiction novel, because the ones that came after it, Valis and Divine Invasion and Transmigration of Timothy Archer, which he considered part of a trilogy, and Radio Free Albemuth, since it wasn't published, couldn't be considered part of the trilogy, although I really feel it is, are not really science fiction novels in any traditional sense, particularly Valis. Divine Invasion is very influenced by the Kabbalah and is really wild and religious and mystical and quite fun. And Timothy Archer is really kind of straight ahead fiction, mainstream fiction, which Philip K. Dick started with and couldn't make a success of, and turned to science fiction to make a living and turned it into art of a high level. Even though I think some of his mainstream novels are that he wrote earlier are very, very good, and one that he wrote a little later, Confessions of a Crap Artist, is quite good. My favorite of the mainstream novels is probably In Milton Lumpke Territory and The Man Whose Teeth Were All Exactly Alike, which are right up there for me, like with the mainstream writers of the time, Philip Roth and Saul Bellow and the other sort of literary establishment guys who were getting attention. Philip K. Dick, till really after he was dead, was never really accepted by the literary establishment. And even now, it's kind of a struggle for him to have the recognition he deserves. But he's got a lot more of it than any other science fiction writer, really.
What is it you've known of Philip K. Dick for a long time? Was there any specific thread or theme, and how did you first hear of Philip K., or did you ever know him personally?
No, I never knew Philip K. Dick personally. But what really appealed to me about Radio Free Albemuth, I was a music critic at one point for the New Orleans Times-Picayune and for Downbeat Magazine, Jazz Magazine. And Radio Free Albemuth takes place in the music business in an alternate reality around 1974, when a president like Nixon has burned the tapes and is still in office 10 years later. And I think that that kind of combination of politics and art and mysticism, those have been sort of recurrent fascinations of mine always. And this is a novel that really combined it. It was done as a play, kind of successfully. It just took place on a what you call a black box stage with no props and no scenery. And I thought it kind of worked well enough just as a story and just as a character study that it really encouraged me to do Radio Free Albemuth as a really modestly budgeted movie. I had been asked to teach a course on micro-budget filmmaking at UCLA, and I didn't know anything about it. But in the back of my mind, I thought, well, this will be good research for doing Radio Free Albemuth. So I brought in everybody who had done sort of an under $500,000 movie that was successful. And that's how I sort of formulated doing Radio Free Albemuth. The big difference between Radio Free Albemuth and these other successful micro-budget movies was the number of special effects that Radio Free Albemuth involved, which was close to 200. And nobody had really done a micro-budget film with that many special effects. And that proved to be really the hardest, most challenging aspect of it, that there were really no companies. We kind of got off to a false start on the special effects and wasted some money. And so I kind of went back and found artists on my own and was really kind of supervised the special effects myself and kind of farmed out shots to different special effect artists who loved Philip K. Dick or wanted to do this kind of interesting, challenging material. And I decided that rather than try to do them sort of at the Marvel kind of special effects level, I would do them in a way that kind of harkened back to the 80s, which is when the movie took place. And some people like that aesthetic, and some people just think it's crap. So there you go.
Right. Well, I think you're definitely on the right thread, because having seen a lot of films that deal with in science fiction, there's a big retro movement in science fiction where they want to recapture the feel of the 80s. So a lot of films are directed. The ones I've seen are directed with that 80s vibe and music. So you're definitely right on the money with that. Now, Radio Free Albemuth had a few well-known actors. So you had, I have a picture of here, this fellow here who looks, you really, here we go.
Shea Wiggum.
Here we go. Welcome me a second. Yeah, that's right. He really portrayed Phil, yeah, right to the T. He looked in the way he acted, and then you had this fellow over here, Jonathan Scarf.
Yeah, who plays Nick Brady. But in the novel, really, Nick and Phil are sort of two heads of the same person. And in many shots, I tried to show that. It's a very talky movie, and I usually tried to make them almost like twins and symmetrical in most of the shots where they're talking together, because Philip K. Dick was a record store clerk in Berkeley, and the character of Nick plays that part of Phil, who has these visions and hears these voices. Right. And Phil, the science fiction writer, his friend, is skeptical of all of it. And I just thought that was kind of delicious. I don't know whether other word to use than delicious, in the sense that Phil, the science fiction writer, says to Nick at one point, I don't even believe in flying saucers. I don't even think flying saucers are real.
Right.
And it's kind of a portrait of friendship. And I think Philip K. Dick kind of hungered for friendship. I kind of think of him as a lonely guy. And the character of Phil in the movie, who is really the writer, Philip K. Dick, in essence, even though I never call him by his last name for contractual reasons. The character, when he lived in San Francisco in the 50s, not many people know this, but when he lived in Berkeley in the 50s, he hung out with the Beats. One of his roommates was this great beat poet named Jack Spicer, who I'd actually, when I was in a writer's workshop program, studied quite a bit without knowing any connection to Philip K. Dick. And Spicer, interestingly enough, also felt he was getting radio signals from extraterrestrials or mystical sources. So who knows if in some way that didn't influence Philip K. Dick or infect him, maybe, if you think. I've no doubt, let me put it this way. I've no doubt that Philip K. Dick was entirely sincere about the 2374 experiences. He wouldn't have written 2 million words in a private journal if it hadn't happened. By the way, for those of you like this kind of mystical, semi-scientific stuff, the part of the journal, a large chunk of it, was published as a book called The Exegesis a few years back, that the science fiction writer Jonathan Lethem, who is a big Philip K. Dick fan and edited the American Library editions of Philip K. Dick, sort of the scholarly reprinting of some of the novels, edited The Exegesis and was involved with it, and as well as some other Philip K. Dick scholars. So he was entirely sincere, and he was also very much into music. And I was lucky in that I was able to cast Alanis Morissette in really her first dramatic role as Sylvia, the woman who comes to work at the record company and kind of has secrets about what Nick is experiencing. And I was also very fortunate in that the singer-songwriter Robin Hitchcock, who I think is just a genius, that in some alternate reality he is every bit as big as the Beatles and Dylan and all of the greats, maybe, you could argue slightly below that level, but right up there with all the greats. Gave us 10 songs and helped write the score. And his music is just perfectly kind of psychedelic pop, in keeping with what I felt was the era and the themes of the movie. And it's funny, I kind of stalked Robin Hitchcock at one point and went to a very small music store thing, record store thing he was doing, and got to talk to him and said, "Are you a Philip K. Dick fan?" Because I thought, surely he is. And he said to me, "I read literature, not science fiction." And I thought, oh shit, this is never going to work out.
Oh.
But then we were having dinner with the wonderful late British actor, oh my God, Alan Rickman, who is a very good friend of my wife and producing partner, Elizabeth Carr's. And I said to Alan, "Hey, this guy you've probably never heard of, Robin Hitchcock, is playing at this small club called Largo. Do you want to come? We were going to go hear him before you called us for dinner. Do you want to come?" And he said, "Oh, I'm very good friends with Robin." And I said, so I had Alan approach Robin for us. And that's how and he looked at a rough cut of the movie and said, "I love this. Let me help you." And he really more or less donated 10 songs to us for the movie and worked on the score. And also a wonderful composer here in LA named Ralph Grierson, through a mutual friend, I found out was a terrific Philip K. Dick fan. And he had the distinction, Ralph had the distinction of being John Williams' favorite keyboard artist, as well as the French composer Pierre Boulez's favorite keyboard artist. But Ralph, he was Randy Newman's favorite session pianist. You can imagine how good he is if Randy Newman, who's a pretty good pianist, uses Ralph Grierson on his recordings, as well as John Williams using him on E.T. for the score. But what had happened to Ralph was he was playing at the Shrine Auditorium for a special, I think, 30th anniversary screening of E.T., and he tripped on a cable and broke his wrist. And you hear Ralph play, and it sounds amazing. But to Ralph's ears, he's like an Olympic gold medalist who broke his leg. And now when he skis, you know, he's that fraction off. That's the difference in his mind between a gold medal and, you know, a bronze medal. So he thought, now is the time to me to get back to composing. So he did a large section of the score too for us. It was very difficult to work with Robin on it because Robin was in England and doesn't have a studio. But Ralph lives very close to me, and so I was able to go into his studio and work with him very closely on the score. And I just love the score, and parts of Robin's work is in it and parts of Ralph's, and it's kind of seamless. And I'm very proud of the music in the film. And even though I was a music critic, I don't play any instruments really, except guitar a little badly. So I had to kind of find really an interesting way to communicate and think about music for the movie. And that was one of the great learning curves of it for me that I really enjoyed.
And currently, since your film debuted at our festival, and actually prior to at the Lincoln Center, what's the evolution? You had a 15 city theatrical run, and afterwards it was currently, is it currently in Netflix right now, or is it in Amazon Prime, or both?
Well, it played theatrically in 2014 in 15 cities, including New York and LA. And we used that theatrical run to sort of get a very good Netflix deal. So it played for 3 years on Netflix exclusively, and now it's playing on Amazon Prime. So anyone with a Prime subscription can watch it if they're in the United States. It's not playing on Amazon Prime in Canada or any other country, but just the United States, and it's done very well on Amazon.
In the U.S.
Prime. Only in the U.S. Yeah. So one of the things that was so cool about doing this movie was that there was such a community of people. You know, the actors all worked for scale, for SAG minimum, Screen Actors Guild minimum. Everyone kind of worked on it for nothing. None of the producers took any fee. I didn't take any fee as a director. So we were able to really get everything on the screen. All of our budget is on the screen, and it's a really fun way to make the movie. We were lucky we had a private investor, and he just put up the necessary cash, the hard cash we needed to make it. And I got to make exactly the movie I wanted to make within the limitations of the budget we had. It was a little, I would say that it was really challenging to do the special effects. And it was a very ambitious movie for a low budget, micro budget movie. I have a friend who likes to call it an efficiently budgeted movie. It's very challenging to do because we had like 40 locations and 40 speaking parts. And usually the template for these kinds of movies is do them in a house with 3 actors. But I set myself a really challenging task, and we shot it in 24 days, and we shot it using what was a very good camera at the time, the Thompson Viper Stream, which is the camera David Fincher used for Benjamin Button and Zodiac, and nobody uses it anymore. But it was a really great camera at the time, has a really beautiful color palette, and shoots well in low light conditions. And as you could see from that still of Shea Wiggum on the mattress, it's just kind of captures color beautifully. And I'm very proud of the movie. We were able to do some interesting things, and I think that the film kind of polarizes audiences, which I was surprised about how much it polarized audiences, because I think it has a very anti-authoritarian viewpoint. At one point, the character Nick Brady says to Phil, communism, fascism, they're both the same thing. And I think that's true. And I think in this polarized era where we're into very authoritarian governments are coming back, the movie really has a strong message that either puts your teeth on edge or you really resonate to it. We're very fortunate that the wonderful actor Scott Wilson came on board. Scott Wilson, his screen debut was one of the greatest movies of the 60s called In Cold Blood, in which he stars with Robert Blake as the two killers. And most audiences know him from being on Walking Dead for a lot of years. And he came on board and played the president. And we knew him a little bit personally, and we got to be very good friends before his death a couple of years ago. And he was just one of these amazing guys that it was just such a pleasure to direct and work with, playing these scenes in the Oval Office. And the whole movie was that way. Everyone who came on board for the right reasons and worked their asses off. And one point I thought the movie would kill me, and I kind of accepted that. If you got to die, you might as well die doing something you love.
I recall watching an interview with the director of Stalker, Tarkovsky, and he said something very similar, that sometimes you have to die for your art. Hopefully that doesn't happen physically, but it's a very exhausting and exhilarating process, as you can imagine.
Yes, and we were lucky in that some of our actors, like Catherine Winnick, has gone on to get a lot of attention from being the lead in Vikings, and she loved doing the movie. She was all in. Everyone really who worked on the movie was all in. My wife and producing partner, Elizabeth Carr, has a very strong background in theater, and this was really the first movie she was involved with. She's also a wonderful actress. But she's done a lot of theater here in LA, and she helped us cast the movie, bringing in really strong theater actors for me to see. And one of the great roles in it is the part of Leon at the end, who's played by Frank Collison, who's one of the Coen brothers' favorite actors, and he plays the preacher at the end, who's very pivotal to the story. And Elizabeth's been such a great team player and so important. There was a kind of an epilogue scene I shot that she's in that I ended up cutting from the movie, and she was on board with that. That kind of explains why Nick is the chosen one. He's the one who Valis uses as a messenger, and it was a great scene. It just was one ending too many for the movie. I think that's actually true of Westworld this last season. The stuff that comes after the credits is kind of one ending too much or two endings too much. So we cut it from the movie. Who knows? Nothing ever is finished these days. So it may come back in at some point. I think that the great thing Elizabeth did was that I had a lot of experience in distribution and buying and selling films from the business point of view at one point in my career. And when we went out to kind of find distribution for Radio Free Albemuth in the United States, a lot of companies wanted it, but they didn't really want to do a theatrical release of any importance. So we raised money on Kickstarter, and Elizabeth really spearheaded that. We were like the fourth or fifth most successful Kickstarter in history for distribution. And we raised about $100,000 for the theatrical release. And that's nice. But what was really important was that we had about 1,000 people who donated and became involved. And they became like a little virtual army for us to publicize the movie And one of the guys who came on board as an associate producer for an associate producer credit, designed our website. And I like to think of it like, if you remember Tom Sawyer, the picket fence, where he gets all of his friends to join him, that it's fun painting the fence. So we're really lucky in that we kind of put together a way of making movies. And as a result, going around the country to festivals, our company has really begun to focus on science fiction and what I call elevated genre, smart science fiction, mostly from writers like Lucius Shepard and Ian Watson and Philip K. Dick, as our core mission to do these kinds of films and develop these kinds of projects for TV and for streaming and for film. And we're kind of working hard at that and looking for investment and looking for partners. And at one point we partnered with the Philip K. Dick estate on Flow My Tears, the Policeman said. And that was announced as a big budget science fiction film at Cannes. And then they went under. They had done the Terminator Salvation movie, not the estate, but the company, the Halcyon company that came on board. They bought the Terminator franchise, and they were lovely guys to work with. They paid for a rewrite. It's taken us a few years to get it out of the bankruptcy proceedings, but we've been working on it with a really interesting young director who's a huge Philip K. Dick fan, and I'm about to turn in a new draft to him, and we'll see if he stays on board, and if we go forward with him.
A new draft of Flow My Tears, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm looking forward. In fact, that would be a next very interesting film, because he certainly think a lot of Phil seems to resonate more and more with the passing time. I mean, what do you think he would say now regarding, well, for some people, 2016 election seemed to be almost like a parallel reality shift. And then now that we have a pandemic and with the lockdown, what do you think Phil's thoughts would be on this? I mean, on his what's going on worldwide? I mean, what?
Well, I would have to say, there's that great quote from the New York Times. It's Philip K. Dick's world. We're only living in it. And I think sometimes since he's dead, we've all continued on in his decomposing mind, maybe not even his full mind. There's a terrific science fiction novel by a writer named who was the writer who Thomas Dish, who had a very interesting relationship to Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick became convinced that Thomas Dish was a government agent who ratted on him and put him under government surveillance. There's a little bit of paranoia there. But he wrote a novel about the mind under the conditions of being buried and decomposing. And sometimes I think of that as kind of we're in Philip K. Dick's mind. And if you look at what's going on in the United States, particularly if you have sort of a left-wing progressive viewpoint at all, it's sort of like Dr. Strangelove revisited. But the catastrophe is not nuclear war, it's the pandemic. And it's just so satirically surreal. It's as if Dr. Strangelove is being rewritten by Philip K. Dick. And yeah, it does feel like kind of a reality shift. But when we did Radio Free Albemuth, Bush was still president, believe it or not, when we started working on it. And it really resonated with what was going on after 9/11. And it really resonated under Clinton. And it really resonates under Obama and Trump. And I think that's what literature is. Orwell's 1984 is literature, because we're long past 1984, right? And you could say, well, it's irrelevant. Everything that happened in 1984, a lot of it didn't happen. So who cares? But all of the double think and double speak and the Orwellian attempt to control reality and control the narrative, it's more true today than it was when Orwell wrote it in the 50s or 1949. I think he may have written it, and he wrote it about Stalinism, really. But it's equally true in my thinking about Trumpism. So 1984 has stood the test of literature, and for me, I think Radio Free Albemuth really stands the test of literature, even though we're past Nixon, who the president of Ferris Fremont is modeled on very clearly. He also partakes of every president we've had since then. Clinton's folkiness, and it doesn't change. The Philip K. Dick, more human than human, that theme, what is human, that was one of the dominant themes of all of Philip K. Dick's work. And what is real is the other dominant theme. And the third theme really is the value of the individual against the supremacy of the state. And right now, we are seeing that so clearly, where the state says the state must survive even if we lose more lives. And it's an interesting argument. I'm not saying there's a black and white answer, but we are right up against that theme of the value of the individual against the supremacy of the state. We are so clearly in it, and Philip K. Dick would see it very clearly that that's what's going on, and he would see that there is a nuanced answer that's necessary, that we can't go back. I mean, look in Flow My Tears, the Policeman said, all of the students are living underground, literally, because of the rebellions of the 60s and 70s. They were all forced to live in underground bunkers. Well, what are we doing now if not social distancing, basically in underground bunkers?
Right.
Who knows if we may not be there in this pandemic or the next one. So Philip K. Dick would have said, reality is outpacing what I can imagine. And one of the challenges for me doing this rewrite of Flow My Tears, the Policeman said, which I started before the pandemic, is do I just ignore it in this rewrite? That reality is going to be different in 20 years because of the pandemic? Or I just try to weave it in? And am I prescient enough? Is my crystal ball clear enough that I can see what America will be like in 20 years following this pandemic? Who knows? I'll take a stab at it. And probably before we shoot it, if we ever get back to shooting movies, which I hope we do, obviously I'm eager for that to begin and for movie theaters to open and for production to begin again. That's going to be one of the last thing that happens safely, right? When people are having love scenes who aren't married. Maybe we'll only be able to cast married actors to kiss each other on set. Maybe we'll have to have very small movies where you have people working in sets, glass enclosed sets that are glassed off or walled off from the crew, and the camera is zipping around inside, like the way we shoot a lot of special effects stuff now. But you're not going to be able to have 300. You look at the credits for a movie like this Netflix movie Extraction that just debuted
Right.
last week, and there's probably 1,000 people in the film credits, and a lot of them are all working together, whether it's in post or during production or pre-production. How are you going to get back to that? So Phil would be delighted that his stuff is being read, it's being discussed seriously, that mainstream movie audiences are being exposed to movies that have at least a little taste of it. He'd certainly be happy that the bucks are coming in, because he lived a very, very hard life for a lot of it, eating dog food at one point, horse meat,
Right.
buying horse meat when he and his second wife lived in Berkeley together, and from the pet shop till they said, we suspect you're eating it. We want to see your dog. So he couldn't have been happier that he's getting recognition, and he got a little taste of it towards the end after the Rolling Stone article, and when John Lennon called him and asking him about the availability of Three Stigmata Eldritch of Palmer Eldritch for a movie, and when he got to go on the set of Blade Runner and see some of the special effects shots, never got to see the movie. He was delighted by all that attention, and I think he'd have gotten a little finicky about some of the adaptations because they didn't retain a lot of the humanistic elements of his books. And I was very pleased that when we showed at Lincoln Center, one of his very best friends, who was an editor of his, who published Radio Free Albemuth, actually cried and told me Phil would have loved this movie. And I was very touched that his widow, Tessa Dick, I guess she wasn't his widow technically. She was his last wife. She loves the movie, thinks it's the best Philip K. Dick adaptation done, has been a huge supporter of it. That really means the world to me, really, because we've gotten some unkind reviews from mainstream critics who think it's kind of like a hippie relic, but they wouldn't have dug the novel either, so screw them. The movie survives.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Philip would have been very amused by the various narratives that exist right now on YouTube, the various rabbit holes that are taking place regarding what's going on, and he would have felt this is maybe even kind of almost at home in a shifting parallel realities between these different rabbit holes. Everything's saying like, oh, Corona doesn't exist, to Corona is a bio weapon, or is a 5G or whatever. He would have, I think he would have felt interested in this.
He would have felt interested. He might have felt a little less special because in a way the world has caught up to him. Like when you read a writer who doesn't have the same literary value, I think, as Orwell or Dick. By the way, Philip K. Dick considered Radio Free Albemuth kind of an answer to Orwell's The Hopelessness of Orwell's 1984. I'm surprised he didn't consider calling it 1985. But in any case, writers like H.G. Wells and Jules Verne, you read them today and you see that they predicted airplanes and submarines and different inventions, and they're kind of quaint as writers. They don't speak with the same immediacy and the same authenticity that Orwell and Philip K. Dick speak to modern audiences. They're interesting and they have value, especially if you're a hardcore science fiction fan, but they're writers of their day, hugely popular, writing in a style and to an audience that was interested in predicting the future, not understanding human nature. Philip K. Dick used science fiction to write in a way about our current society, as Orwell did, as a lot of great science fiction writers have. But what usually happens with those science fiction writers like Vonnegut and J.G. Ballard is they're kind of co-opted as mainstream writers by the academic establishment and the literary establishment. J.G. Ballard and Kurt Vonnegut and William Burroughs are thought of more as literary writers than science fiction writers, which is kind of a shame because I think in many ways they saw themselves as within a mainstream of science fiction that also wrote great literature. They're all three great writers who use science fiction as a way to comment on contemporary society, as Philip Roth did with this novel of his that's just been made into a mini-series, The Plot Against America, which of course borrows heavily from Man in the High Castle in a way.
Right.
The themes of it and the device of it. Although Philip K. Dick, to be fair, kind of borrowed it from I think it was Upton Sinclair's The Iron Heel, and another novel called It Can't Happen Here.
Right.
That were also about fascism coming to an alternate reality America.
So where do we go? Where do you go from here? Right now, you mentioned Valis, and you mentioned Flow My Tears. Are there any specific projects that you looking to unveil or develop in the next, well, I guess after the pandemic? Is there any one specific one, or right now they're equally from you?
Well, Flow My Tears, the Policeman said, we're hoping to have a director sign off and come on board the project, which means the next step would probably be to go out to actors, and in conjunction with getting financing for it, probably as a fairly big budgeted movie, like a $20 to $40 million movie. And we're also working on doing Radio Free Albemuth as a TV series.
Oh, okay.
We haven't gotten too far with that yet. The difficulty is that really to move forward in TV, you need a showrunner. And because there's so many shows and so much going on, getting a showrunner is really difficult. But I wrote sort of a treatment that kind of reconceptualizes it completely. And we're open to sort of reconceptualizing it. The movie exists as kind of a very straight ahead adaptation. Although I have to say there are really major changes in the movie from the book. But what we're working on right at the moment is that there is this amazing movie called Out of the Blue that Dennis Hopper directed and stars in, that I distributed. One of the first things I did in the movie business. And Dennis and I kind of took the movie around town by town, cinema by cinema, sort of in the early 80s. The movie had been Dennis's only third film as a director. His first movie was Easy Rider as a director, which blew away the world. It changed Hollywood. One of the most successful low-budget movies of all time. And we had a big success with Out of the Blue. Dennis had been hired as an actor, just an actor. And about 2 weeks into production, they were going to shut it down. It was being shot in Canada as kind of a family drama, kind of suitable for kids, maybe to be sold to a TV network as an after-school drama. And the producer, the line producer, said there's nothing usable. Dennis had really shot none of his scenes. And Dennis said, well, let me see what this writer-director has shot. And he looked at it and said, yeah, there's no movie here. But why don't I try to rewrite the script and take over as director? And they kind of felt they had nothing to lose. So the movie was originally called CB, and it didn't have any punk element in it. It was kind of already cast with Linda Manns, an amazing young actress who had been in Terry Malick's Days of Heaven and Philip Kaufman's The Wanderers. And she was cast as the little girl, and Raymond Burr was cast as the shrink. And it was all about the relationship really between the shrink and the little girl, the teenage girl. No punk rock, nothing. She loved Elvis. That was really the only element. So Dennis was riding around that weekend and heard Neil Young's Out of the Blue on the radio. And he knew Linda Manns was interested in punk rock and interested in music. So he totally rewrote the script. And the lines in Neil Young's song are, hey, hey, my, out of the blue and into the black. The king is gone, but not forgotten. The king is gone, but not forgotten. This is a story of Johnny Rotten. And of course, the king means Elvis the king, but it's really about punk rock. So he sort of did this whole amazing, not improvised, but reconceived movie. He shot all of Raymond Burr's scenes to keep him in the movie, but never intended to use them. And he shot it in 21 days and edited it in 6 weeks. After Easy Rider, he'd done this film called The Last Movie, like a year later, and he was given carte blanche. Took him like 2 years to edit it, and it was kind of considered incomprehensible. It debuted at Venice, but it resulted in nobody willing to hire him as a director for 10 years. So Out of the Blue was his return to the director's chair. It was accepted at Cannes, but because it was a Canadian tax shelter film, it lost its Canadian certification. And it was the only movie ever to debut at Cannes. It debuted in 1980 without a country. And the investors and the producers were at each other's throats because it went from being a movie that was assured a profit to being assured almost a total write-off because it lost its Canadian tax shelter status because Dennis was an American. So I kind of got to see it after I distributed a movie called The Wicker Man, which was a big success. Everyone sent me these lost movies, and Time Magazine did an article on me. And most of the movies I saw were terrible and unreleasable, but I thought Out of the Blue was brilliant. So I contacted Dennis, and he agreed to kind of get involved with me and really help promote it the way we did The Wicker Man with Christopher Lee, kind of going city to city. And Dennis would say to me, Jack and Warren love my movie. And I said, well, how's that going to help us? And he said, well, you don't know Jack, because Dennis really had helped make Jack a star with Easy Rider, Jack Nicholson a star. He said, Jack has this little book, and every time a friend asks him a favor, he takes out the little book and shows you your name in it and crosses out your name and does you the favor. I said, well, time to have your name crossed out. So we flew up to Aspen and spent a weekend there. And Dennis and Jack and I spent, hours talking about everything under the sun. And I would kind of bring the topic back to Out of the Blue. And I edited it into this great radio spot. And we opened Out of the Blue in Boston at the Coolidge Corner Cinema and broke the house record and played 10 weeks. And Dennis kept saying, well, when are you going to open New York? I said, well, I'll get you on the Letterman show if you ease back on drinking and drugs and stuff. And, you're responsible. And he agreed to that. So we played New York, and we were the top grossing screen, and we played LA and a handful of other cities. And Sean Penn saw the movie, I understand, in LA and thought, yeah, let's bring Dennis back to do another movie. And he hired him to do Colors, which Sean Penn starred in with Robert Duvall. And Dennis was always very generous when I'd run into him and say, this is the guy who relaunched my career as a director. And Dennis thought I should direct. And I thought, well, I'm very confident as a writer, and I think I'd be a good producer. I had a producing deal at Universal. And I said, I don't know anything about working with actors. And he said, I'll teach you. And Dennis really, when we were on the road together, really taught me a lot about the actor's process and his process. And I don't think I would have ever directed Radio Free Albemuth if it hadn't been for Dennis Hopper. So at a certain point, we kind of took over the negative of the movie. We had made some international deals for the producers, and they wanted out. So we had done a restoration of the movie in 35 millimeter in 2010, really right before Dennis Hopper got sick. The Cinémathèque Française and the Thompson Foundation helped support that. And I produced that restoration. Basically, Dennis trusted me to do the post-production work, to supervise it at Technicolor. And it was done in time for Dennis to go to Paris for a retrospective on his career. And the centerpiece was the 35 millimeter restoration. And we struck two 35 millimeter prints, one which we've kept at the Cinémathèque Française and one which we've used to screen at places like the British Film Institute and Lincoln Center Film Society and the Brooklyn Academy of Music and the Metrograph in New York. But the print gets worn out and it's gotten a little damaged. And I thought, well, the 40th anniversary of the movie's premiere in Cannes is coming up. So let's do a restoration. So Elizabeth Carr and she really spearheaded another Kickstarter on the restoration on Out of the Blue, which raised some money. And we were very pleased that terrific actresses, Natasha Lyonne, it's her favorite movie, and Chloe Sevigny, it's her favorite movie, came on board to support it. And they became presenters of the movie. And we did a beautiful 4K restoration at Roundabout Entertainment in Burbank, where they really worked with us. And we premiered at the Venice Film Festival as an official selection last year in the fall. And we were all set to have the U.S. premiere at South by Southwest in March, on Friday, March 20th. And then on March 6th, they canceled South by Southwest after an order by the mayor because of the pandemic. So now we were going to have a theatrical release in the late summer, early fall, and now we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. We're hoping to have a New York and LA theatrical release and some other cities, and then do a streaming deal to make the movie available. We had just signed a deal to have the movie theatrically released in France and come out on video on demand in France. And what do you do? It's up in the air. Nobody's going to movie theaters. We're going to have to see. We're kind of playing it by ear. And if people want to help see what's kind of going on with the movie, even though the Kickstarter is over, we have a Slacker backer site, which is www.dennishopper.com. I think that's it. It's on that. No, I'm sorry. Out of the Blue, DennisHopper.com. Let me quickly look, actually.
Oh, okay.
I'd like people to be able to see. If you go to the Kickstarter site, it's linked to outofthebluedennishopper.com. That's the web address, outofthebluedennishopper.com. And you can order a Blu-ray or a DVD as a premium. You can get a vintage poster signed by Linda Manns. And if you want to really support the project, because we weren't able to get any foundation support, and we undertook it kind of on our own, on a leap and a prayer, and we're way in the red on our projections for the project. You could become an associate producer or executive producer of the restoration, and you're going to be immortal, because this is an amazing movie. Amazing quotes from Roger Ebert. He called it an unsung treasure. One of the great indie films. Vincent Canby in the New York Times gave it a great review. A movie of rude, rough vitality. David Elliott of USA Today called it a hellbent classic. It's just one of the most. The Sight and Sound magazine gave it a rave review. The Boston Globe. Critics love this movie, and I guarantee you one thing: it'll knock your socks off. It is so fresh and shocking even today. It's really kind of a spiritual sequel to Easy Rider, about the idealism of the 60s and 70s being overtaken by the decadence and nihilism of the 80s. So anyone who really wants to support the movie, just even you're joining the project to support it at any level is so appreciated. And we're kind of playing it by ear. What'll happen? Elizabeth Carr has really been my kind of co-producing partner on this restoration, and we're very proud of how beautiful it is. It's going to be playing at the Taipei Film Festival in Taiwan. We've just accepted that invitation to screen, where they've got the virus enough under control that they're going to have real screenings, very limited number of seats, but they're going to have real screenings in Taiwan. They're projecting in late June, early July.
So if someone wants to become an associate producer or support the project, they should go to outoftheblue.DennisHopper.com, correct?
Correct. For $5,000, you can get an associate producer credit, and for $10,000, you
Okay.
can get an executive producer credit, and for I think $50, you get a limited edition Blu-ray. You get a Blu-ray, or stream it for a lot less than that at some point. And people are going to have to be patient. They got to do it for the right reasons. We learned that on the Radio Free Albemuth Kickstarter, that you're supporting a project. It's not a store, and you've got to be patient. But ultimately, I think everyone was happy on Radio Free Albemuth. The 1,000 people and everyone, will make everyone happy on Out of the Blue too. That's but there always has to be this understanding that the project comes first, not the merchandise, not the perks.
Okay, great. So, well, I think that pretty much brings up to the we're a little over an hour, John. I want to thank you for having us and bringing us up to date on your project. Again, for those who want to help with Out of the Blue, they should go to outoftheblue.DennisHopper.com, where you'll get a chance to be anything from a limited edition all the way to being an associate producer in the film.
Yeah,
Various
let me say one more.
options available. So,
Let
John,
me say
keep
one more
me.
thing quickly, Dan, which is
Sure.
people can also communicate with me directly if they want on the Radio Free Albemuth movie page, or on the Out of the Blue Dennis Hopper Facebook page. I read messages, or Elizabeth one of us reads them, and people can get in touch with us there. And we're very actively engaged, as you know, with the Philip K. Dick community still, because first and foremost, I'm a Philip K. Dick fan, and
Absolutely.
And that's been one of the great pleasures, is to engage with people. And I hope people will go see the movie on Radio Free on Amazon Prime, or they can go to the RadioFreeAlbemuth.com page to get a poster or get a limited edition DVD with a bonus DVD, signed limited edition. We've still got some of those left. And look, it's not just the support. Support, it means something to us, but it's the community, being engaged with the community of people who love Philip K. Dick. Most of them are just amazing people. We call ourselves dickheads, but we're anything but dickheads. We're the opposite of dickheads.
Right.
It's a great group of people. And Dan, it's really been a pleasure to know you and see how hard you've worked and sacrificed and put your heart and soul into help build this community. I'm so proud of you, and proud that we were the first prize winner, grand prize winner at the Philip K. Dick Film Festival. We played at the European one too. And, reach out to us. We're there. And this is a great time for Philip K. Dick fans to engage. And thank you for facilitating that.
I have a question from one of the from the comment section. This is Baobab Theater. Any chance that when, I suppose, that Radio Free Albemuth will be going to Europe Prime? You have any dates or any ideas when that's taking place?
No. No. We're
no. Okay.
We'll
definitely keep.
We're still hoping. We're still hoping that we're going to be able to make a meaningful European deal the way we did a U.S. Netflix deal, because our movie is not in the black yet. And, those Prime deals are the filmmaker gets like, I think it's like, it's either 6 cents a viewing or 6/100th of a cent, but it ain't much. And nobody can make movies on those click deals that are mostly what the Prime deals are. the Amazon Prime deals are. We're really fortunate to get a license deal from Netflix on Radio Free Albemuth, which went a long way to helping the movie. But we're still hoping that because it's a period piece, the market was kind of glutted with indie movies, and now we're going to be in a shortage. So we're still hoping we're going to be able to do something there that gets the movie to the widest possible audience. We'd be very open to a sponsor, to just having people stream it for free, you know, like a cannabis company or a whiskey company or any brand that wants to be associated with one of Philip K. Dick's great movies, in which, by the way, he smokes pot, which he did during his lifetime. So, you know, it's one of those things where we're still trying to explore opportunities. And while it's frustrating that it's not widely available, look, the people who really want to see it find a way. And I'm not advocating piracy, but you can go on the website and buy a DVD. You can do things to support the movie and have a collector's edition. And where there's a will, there's a way. And eventually, we hope it'll be available worldwide, not just in the U.S. And yeah, there you are. We're doing the best we can.
So is the European DVD version? Sure. Is the European DVD version available on your website?
No, really, it's not per se. But you know, it's really the U.S. version, but it's region free, so it can play on any player.
Region free, okay.
But we're really, you know, we really have to save.
And I have another question.
Yeah.
Lorianne wants to know. Lorianne Gridinock wants to know any future filming of this.
Of what? Couldn't hear you, Dan.
Of Valis, any plans for directing Valis in the future?
Well, I won't direct Valis or Flow My Tears. There's a very interesting novel that's out of print, but you can probably find, called The Child Buyer by a writer named John Hersey. That's sort of science fiction-y, like the way Radio Free Albemuth is. It's about it was written in, I think, 1960. That's what I'd like to be the next film I direct. Again, as a very small film. It's about it's about a little boy who's a genius. It's not sexual at all. A little boy who's a genius, and a think tank comes to a small town to buy him for the military-industrial complex. This was another very prescient novel, because they're talking about using these children who are geniuses as wetware back in 1960 for the defense system.
Okay, great. So for anyone who wants to stay in touch with John, products and developments on Radio Free Albemuth, they should go to radiofreealbemuth.com.
Well, no, they should go to the Facebook page.
Oh, the Facebook. Okay, great.
Radio Free Albemuth.
And what is the Facebook page? Just Radio. Okay, great.
What?
All right.
Wait, one more thing.
I want
to thank Lauren, who really has been a super supporter of the movie, and also shot some of the bonus material that's on the bonus DVD, interview stuff. He's terrific. What a great guy. Can't wait to see him in person again. Hi, Lauren. Oh, hang on one second.
Okay, John, thank you again.
Hang on one second, Dan.
Okay.
Let me, Elizabeth just called, which probably means she realizes I've forgotten to say something, and she can say hi to everyone. Let me just have her come in here. One more time. Hello? I guess we're calling each other. Try one more time.
Hello, you've reached Elizabeth Carr's direct line. Please leave a message after the beep and I'll...
Hello?
Oh, good, I got you.
I'm still on.
Oh, great. Yeah, I wanted you to talk a little bit more about Valis, because he specifically asked you about Valis, and you talked about the child buyer.
Well, yes, thank you. Well, Valis, we're still hoping to do it as a feature film. And in many ways, the TV series of Radio Free Albemuth will incorporate much more of sort of the Valis background from the novel and from the exegesis and from the Philip K. Dick's real experiences. But Valis, the movie, we have a director who it's his favorite book in the world. And we're hoping that when things kind of open up again, he and I will maybe collaborate on a script that he'll direct. That's what we're hoping. But, these things are like, I think what people don't understand is just how hard it is to put these kinds of movies together. Because when you're dealing with a directors take on a project, other than Woody Allen, who's so prolific, most directors, it's 2 or 3 years on a project. And something like Schindler's List, which was Steven Spielberg's dream project. I remember the guy who had the rights to the novel came to LA. I met him. He was a friend of ours. It was close to 20 years before Spielberg actually directed it. He thought his career was going to take off as a producer. He ended up going back to Australia because it took Spielberg 20 years to get ready to direct Schindler's List. And, you could argue that was great. But from my friend's point of view, I'm sure he didn't expect it was going to take 20 years in development for the project to go forward. So when you're working with these directors that you want to work with, they have a lot of projects. They like to keep their options open. The Favorite was in development. Yorgos's movie was in development for 7 or 8 years. And I think that's correct. And he did 2 or 3 movies before it while it was in development. And it was very frustrating for the producers who were only on The Favorite, who weren't working with him on his other projects. And that's kind of where you are, because until all of the elements align, the director, the script, and the financing, and a star, you really don't go forward. So it's hard to juggle those things because actors go off to do other projects. Yorgos, one of the reasons he didn't go forward on The Favorite was he always knew he wanted Olivia Colman to play the Queen, and she was not a name. She just was the actress that he liked, but she was busy with stuff, and he waited for her. And in the meantime, he lost. Cate Blanchett was interested in playing it, and he lost her, and he lost another actress who wanted to do it to play one of the other leads. So that's what happens. And a director comes on board, and he likes the script. And on Flow My Tears, at one time, we had an actor and a director, and the director thought the script was great, but 5% away. And we kept working on it, and I worked on it for free, and he kept giving me notes. And finally, I said to him, "Look, this last set of notes, I really don't understand. You're an Academy Award nominated screenwriter. Why don't you do the notes? Do your notes, because I don't know how to implement them." And he said, "I do not implement them either." And that was the end of that kind of configuration of the movie. where we had a big movie star and we had that director, but he wasn't quite happy with the script, and I couldn't give him the script exactly what he wanted, and he couldn't give himself exactly what he wanted, and so it didn't go any further. So that's what you're kind of dealing with in these deals. There's no money in these development deals as a producer, and usually these directors want to bring on a big writer, $500,000 writer, and you're just digging the hole deeper of expenses on the project, or they want to write it and they don't quite know what to do, and they don't succeed because they don't know the material as well as maybe I did as a Philip K. Dick fan. And it just a friend of mine who is president of the Writers Guild, Howard Rodman, brilliant writer, brilliant guy, said development is that process by which a studio takes a beautiful stalk of wheat and turns it into a slice of Wonder Bread. And there's a lot of truth to that. I know from arbitrating many Writers Guild arbitrations where there have been 20 or 30 writers on a project, that the first draft was often the best draft. That guy may not get a credit, but when I read it, I think, why didn't they just make it the way he wrote it? In TV, they do. In TV, the writer is king. And that's why we've got such great TV today. Vince Gilligan doesn't direct a lot of episodes, and Damon Lindelof doesn't direct any episodes of Watchmen or The Leftovers. But what's better than The Leftovers and The Watchmen in recent years as a series? But he's controlling it as a writer and producer. But movies are not like that. They're more like theater, where the writer is king, the dramatist is king, and the director really doesn't have as much say. And if it's Ridley Scott coming in and doing Blade Runner, which bears very little resemblance to do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, you get a masterpiece. But it ain't the book. And, the great adaptation of, I like to say that the best Philip K. Dick adaptation so far is Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys in Brazil, which aren't from Philip K. Dick books. They're original screenplays. But he captures the spirit and the energy and the themes of Philip K. Dick better than any of the adaptations, in my opinion. I guess I would include my own out of modesty, but we tried to do that. We tried to do a movie that really captures the humor, the politics, all of the elements, the humanity, all the religious stuff, all the elements of why I love Philip K. Dick. So that's a long answer. It's very hard. It's a miracle when these movies happen.
So for those who are just starting out, John, those filmmakers who are just getting, they're just getting their shorts out, what recommendation would you have? I mean, the industry has certainly changed, even from the time you directed film 10 years ago. It's very different today from there was, let's say, 10 years ago, even 20 years ago. So what advice do you have for those who are just starting out, who are passionate, who have stories to tell?
Well, I have different advice. On the most fundamental level, I would say don't become an artist of any kind unless you're going to be happy creating your art with very small or no audience and no income. You may have to do a day gig. And the best day gig for a writer, day gig for a writer, is being like a night watchman where you can sit and write, or a hotel clerk, a night clerk at a hotel.
Right.
Charles Bukowski used to say, one of my favorite writers used to say, who had no audience for many years or very small audience, used to say, I gotta write. It's my therapy. I get very depressed if I don't write. So if you want to be a creator, you have to accept. Dennis Hopper would say, I can always go back to sleeping on a mattress on a floor. I'm not going to do stuff for money. If you want it as a career and you're willing to just write what other people want you to write, commercial stuff, it's very hard to do. It's very competitive and you may not succeed. So my philosophy is do stuff you love, stuff you care about, because at least if it fails, you have that satisfaction. If you make something that you think is garbage because you think other people will like it and you'll make money, you may not. And then what do you got? You got nothing. At least if you write stuff and make movies that you care about. Okay, so that's the first piece of advice. Only do it if you have to. So I'm assuming you have to. And in that instance, a friend of mine named Mark Stolaroff teaches something called the No Budget Film School. And he just did an experimental version of it online. I would say go to his website, look at that, make a movie, make a short, keep making things. That was, I think, a mistake of mine, was that I worked too much within the system. And I made a living as a writer in development deals and producer, but didn't get a lot of stuff made for all these reasons of how hard it is. I'd have been better off kind of just getting out there, making very small things, doing small things, doing it out of the love of it rather than as a job, and getting stuff made. Do that. Do it with your friends. Do whatever you can with whatever you got. If your father owns a warehouse, make a movie in a warehouse. If your father owns a ranch, make a movie using as a ranch as a background, write a script. Use what you've got. Don't wait for anyone else to green light you. Francis Coppola used to say, you don't get permission to make a movie. You make them stop you. Keep going forward. That's the energy you have to have. You're making it, make them stop you. And usually they will. Usually they'll succeed in stopping you one way or another. So that's good advice. The other advice is if you want to make stuff in TV, get an entry-level job. TV is wide open. Great stories are being told. I tend to like movies or limited series better than I do ongoing series, because I like the catharsis, as the Greeks would call it, of a beginning, middle, and end. I don't like the thing just being strung out forever and ever. But TV is a great starting ground. Short films are a great starting ground. Micro budget films are a great starting ground. The great thing about making a small movie, look at a movie like Jeremy Saulnier's Blue Car, which he raised the money on Kickstarter. He was a very experienced cinematographer. He and his friend Macon Blair, who's a writer and actor, they made this movie. It got a lot of attention and got them careers, real careers. So you can't look at it as making money. I would say don't make a horror film, a little bad, crappy horror film to make a small profit on. That won't get you anywhere. And you probably won't make a small profit. Make something that's artistically interesting to you, and maybe there'll be an audience for it, and you'll get into Sundance. 4,000 movies, I think, apply to Sundance, like 150 get in. Of course, that was pre-pandemic. We don't know what next Sundance will be like, but if you're good, maybe that'll get you in, and then you'll have a career. So I think you've got to, kind of choose between right now, today, being an artist and building audience. Use Kickstarter, use Facebook every step of the way. If you want to hire a storyboard artist to do something, raise $5,000 on Kickstarter. It'll be very hard work. But if people aren't interested in your concept, maybe that's telling you something. And then go on and you have a fan base. You maybe have 100 people who helped you raise $5,000 by giving them the original artwork or whatever it is. And then you build from there. You got to build. You got to become a brand and have an audience for your work. When I lecture at film festivals, I have a lecture called 10 Things I Wish I'd Known Before I Made My First Movie. And by the way, one of the premiums of our Kickstarter is kind of one-on-one sessions with me about how to do an indie film. So sign up, help out of the blue, and I'll be there for you. You know, a lot of these people I'm still helping, years later on their projects, giving them advice because, that's what they become friends. That's what friends do. So, it ain't easy.
Well said, John. Well, thank you again for your time. Thanks to Elizabeth, who couldn't join us today. Let's revisit, maybe after the pandemic. So we're hopefully sooner than later. And
one last thing.
God bless.
One last thing, Dan.
Yeah.
Elizabeth was working in theater when I met her, producing and acting in theater. She was a really good theater producer. And I said to her, hey, you're not making any money in small theater. Why don't you come join me in not making any money in small indie films? So here we are. We're working our asses off. We're working harder than we've ever worked. And, when you make money, it's good paydays, but you got to learn to live simply in order to keep your overhead small and be able to do work you love. And I don't mind that trade-off. It's work I love with people I love. And, one of the happiest people I know was an actor who never had any success. He worked as a waiter in a nice hamburger restaurant and did Shakespeare and Chekhov and Williams and did small theater productions of them. A lovely actor, terrific actor, had no TV or film career for reasons, I don't know. He's one of my favorite actors, and he was happy. So if you're happy with what you're doing, that's the reward. And if you can make money at it, that's an even better reward. And if you can become rich and famous, it's unlikely. That's winning the lottery, but who knows? One of the people in Elizabeth's theater company is an actress named...
Anything is possible.
One of the actresses in Elizabeth's theater company is an actress named Tessa Thompson, who's now a huge actress. She's one of the leads on Westworld and has been in the Avengers movies, and she can get a movie made just from her name. Maybe not a huge movie, but a smaller movie. So just got to keep doing it. And one of the directors.
Thanks a lot.
I can go on forever, Dan. You're gonna have to cut me off. I'm not getting out much.
Okay. Well, no, we have time. Go ahead.
I was gonna say one of the directors who kind of would come in at Mark Stolaroff's class, and I think I had him into my micro budget class, was a director named. Now I got to look up his name real quickly. His name is Sean Baker. Sean Baker. He was doing all of these small films till he did a movie with his iPhone that got a lot of attention. And last movie he did was Florida Project with Willem Dafoe that got, I think it got an Academy Award nomination for Willem Dafoe, but he was making all these like $100,000 movies. And one of them helped make the girl who plays Captain Marvel a star. Boy, my memory's not too great today, but there you go. Hopefully it's not the virus affecting it. But Sean Baker did this lovely movie called I wish people could talk on this. They'd probably jump in and say something. A movie he did, The Tangerine. That was the movie that really got him attention. That he did with an iPhone. made it for really almost next to nothing. And then he also did a movie with no stars. And then he did a movie before that called Starlet, another no budget movie. And movies for like under $50,000, and kind of honed his craft. Malcolm Gladwell says in Outliers, his book, that everyone who becomes great at what they do spends about 10,000 hours practicing. The Beatles became the Beatles because they went off to Hamburg and played like 3 shows a day at the Star Club and all these small venues. That's how they became the Beatles. They were not the Beatles of Sgt. Pepper and Revolver and Rubber Soul when they started out. So,
well, it's about perseverance and commitment to your craft.
Yeah, and belief in the work, commitment to the work, and
right.
focusing on the process rather than the result. There's a great line in Radio Free Albemuth, which is, we're judged not by the success of our efforts, but by what's in our hearts. And that line really resonated with me because I think it's so true. The ultimate reward is that we've done everything we can on the things we love and the things we believe in. And if you do that, if that's how you set the definition of success, then it's under your control. The enemy is you. Like, did I really do everything I could do? Did I do my best work today? There's a great system called The Tools that I recommend people check out. 2 guys who had a New Yorker did a big article on them. They're 2 shrinks. And named Barry Michaels and Phil Stutz. I really highly recommend people check out The Tools and go on their website, thetools.com. They're doing some free sessions during the pandemic. In fact, Phil Stutz is doing one next weekend. Barry Michaels just did one this weekend. And the books and their work is it's really important to me. It kind of crystallizes a lot of things that I believe in and gives you very concrete tools to get better. They realized people were in therapy with them for years and they weren't getting any better. So they came up with these tools for people to use to use during times when they need them to get better and change their lives. And they're very powerful tools if you use them consistently, which I wish I did more.
They're called The Tools, TOOLS.
The Tools. They can go to thetools.com and there's lots of free blogs. Right, but if they read the book,
okay,
and if they read the 2 books the guys have written, they really lay out the philosophical framework. And there's a certain amount of mysticism in it, a belief in higher forces, but you don't need to believe in the higher forces. You just have to use them. I've written a screenplay. One of the things I've just written, and we're trying to get a director on, is an adaptation of a great Lucius Shepard novel that I really recommend called The Handbook of American Prayer, which is really all about that. It's about a guy who begins praying to sort of an unknown God that he doesn't really believe in, but the prayers begin to have some efficacy, and he becomes kind of a new age guru. And it's a terrific novel, very funny, very terrific thriller too. And I hope that'll be a movie we produce soon. Netflix read the script and they like it, and who knows, maybe we'll do it there, maybe we'll do it somewhere else. Just depends. We have some directors looking at it now. So hang in there.
Okay. I think that
yeah, it's a time of great hope.
You too. Stay safe, John.
I'm going to say one more thing, Dan.
Yeah.
This is a time to really test yourself. You know, This is a time to do the work you want to do, to work on yourself. You know, maybe the world's going to end, but so what? It ends and you lost 30 pounds. It ends and you wrote the novel you always want to write. But maybe it won't end. And you'll have a novel and you'll have lost that weight you always wanted to lose and gotten your house in order and done whatever the hell you've wanted to do and haven't had a chance to do. Use this as a time to work on yourself and to work on your dreams and work on your heart and work on your relationships. And let's be compassionate and kind and patient with each other. And thank you all for being patient with me. I've rambled on way too much, but it was good for me. Hope it wasn't too bad for you.
It was great. It was great. No, absolutely not, John. It was great talking with you. Stay well. Take care.
Thank you, Dan.
Let's revisit in a few months.
Absolutely. Would love to.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Okay, people, thanks for coming in. Again, I just wanted to make sure, please subscribe to our channel, the YouTube channel. We want to get more than 50 likes in the next few days. And I'll keep bringing you guests for Filmmaking Festival. Thanks again to John and Elizabeth for sharing their information. And thank you all for watching. So hang in, stay safe, stay well, and I will see you real soon. Bye-bye.